Hello everybody, welcome to today's webcast focusing on Power BI. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. So my name is John Ward. I'm a principal consultant at Thorogood with over 15 years of experience of working with Microsoft Business Intelligence technologies. It's fair to say that I've become a bit of a Power BI convert over the last year or so. My initial experience of Power BI was relatively underwhelming in comparison to other visualization tools. But the pace of development has been really impressive and I now regularly use it for my own analysis, and I'm pretty excited about what the future holds. So today, we're going to start by looking at the evolution of the product and demo some of the latest features. We'll follow that by looking at the architecture and cover some of the considerations for enterprise use. And finally, we'll have a look at some of the upcoming features and direction. So what is Power BI? There are two key parts of Power BI. The desktop application, which is free and allows you to carry out visual analysis on data from lots of sources. And the Power BI service, which is a cloud-based service where you can publish datasets and reports and collaborate. We'll look at these in more detail later, but for the moment, I think the best way of introducing these is with a quick demo. So I'm going to demo one way that I use Power BI in Thorogood to analyze data we store in our Salesforce system in order to look at information about today's webcast. So this is Power BI desktop tool. Now I can load data into this tool for analysis from multiple data sources by clicking this Get Data button and, for example, looking for Salesforce. I've actually already loaded the data into Power BI for today's demo, and so I'm ready to explore this data. Firstly, I'm going to add a filter to select this webcast only. So I'll add the campaign name. One of the recent additions to Power BI is the ability to change this to a drop-down list as opposed to just a tick list. I'm going to enable search on this and search for today's event so that I can view data related to today's webcast. So how many people have registered for today's event? I'm going to use a simple KPI visualization and look at a count of the number of people attending, 168. Now I want to understand how people found out about the event. I use a donut visualization, look at the source of registrations, and again, look at the count of people. So I can see quickly that the majority of people registered because of the email flyer that I'm sure you're all used to receiving. So now I want to understand when people registered. So for this, I'm going to use a line chart to visualize the registrations over time. Again, I'm going to look at the number of contacts, but this time I'm going to use the created date. Now you'll see on the right-hand side here that Power BI has automatically created me a time hierarchy based off my date time stamp. And this now enables me to drill from year level down into daily level. In fact, if I wanted to look at this at a more granular level, because I've got a date time stamp, I can actually look at it in more detail. So I can change to use the actual date time stamp field. And again, using a relatively new feature for Power BI, I can create custom groupings within this dimension at an hourly level. I'll give a different name, and then I just need to ensure that's used for my graph. So now I've got a more detailed level where I can actually look on an hour-by-hour basis when people registered for this event. And we can see there was a spike at the beginning when our first email flyer went out, steady stream of registrations over the last few weeks, and then a second flyer was sent out recently, which added more registrations. Finally, I want to have a look at this chart with a running total rather than just the individual registrations. So I'm going to duplicate that chart, and rather than looking at the count, I'm going to look at a measure I've created called the cumulative registrations. Now ideally, I'd want this as an inbuilt calculation within Power BI, so that I could just select it and enable this graph. Same way that some other visualization tools have inbuilt calculations, but this functionality isn't available yet, so I've had to build this calculation myself. If I look at the calculation, you may be able to see at the top here, there's a calculation I've written. So this is moving away from the sort of user-friendly self-service capability, but it does show the rich calculation language that's within Power BI that allows advanced calculations to be built into a model. And the standard feature of Power BI is interactivity between graphs. So if I wanted to look at the profile of email campaigns, I can do that, or click on colleague to see if there's a different pattern in terms of registrations through people who have recommended this event to their colleagues. So that was a quick overview of a way that I might use Power BI Desktop to quickly connect and analyze data. What I'll show you now briefly is how I can then publish this to the Power BI cloud service so that I can share this report with other colleagues. You can click the Publish button at the top here, and that will connect to Cloud Power BI service and upload this report and the underlying data. I've already stored my credentials in Power BI Desktop, so it's able to connect automatically. So that's uploaded now. I can click on this link and it will show me that same report, but now viewed through a browser. And viewed through hosted in the cloud, available through a browser, enables me to share this with colleagues. And you'll see here that you have the same functionality as I had in Power BI Desktop. The ability to hover over charts and see detail, the ability to interact with the different visualizations. Let's look for a different event that I've been involved in recently. This was an in-person workshop that ended up being run 3 times because of demand. But at the moment, because of the way I set this report up, I can only view one of the events at a time. If I wanted to combine stats from more than one run of that event, I can't at the moment. So I have to edit this report. I'm going to do that directly through the browser. You can see once I've clicked on Edit Report, I get the same sort of layout as I had in Power BI Desktop with pretty much the same functionality. So I can now look at the properties of this selection box, go to Selection Controls and turn off my single select, which enables me to select more than one event and see the combined registrations for that event. I'll save that report. Finally, just a quick look at the left-hand side pane here. This gives me overviews of what I have in my workspace. This is the report that I've just uploaded from Power BI Desktop. You'll see also that the underlying data set has also been uploaded. And this allows people to do their own ad hoc analysis based on top of that data set with the same functionality as is in Power BI Desktop. But also, they also automatically get the data I've loaded, the modeling, any calculations I've added, without having to understand how to do that themselves. So let's have a look now at the history of Power BI. Back in 2010, Microsoft introduced Power Pivots into Excel, which was a data modeling tool hosted within Excel. In 2013, they added Power Query, which enabled loading of data into Excel and Power Pivot from various data sources in a more robust manner than was previously possible. Power View was added, which gave a visualization capability similar to that we've just been looking at. And these 3 components baked into Excel were the key aspects of Power BI: the data loading, modeling, and visualization. In 2014, Microsoft released Power BI for Office 365, which was built around SharePoint Online, and which was really built around SharePoint sites that allowed you to publish content from Excel into SharePoint Online for sharing and collaboration. So overall, the first release of Power BI had some nice features, but was very tied into having the latest versions of Excel and SharePoint Online, which meant it wasn't available to a lot of people and slowed down the ability to release improvements. So at the start of 2015, Microsoft announced a different direction for Power BI. This culminated in the launch in July 2015 of Power BI Desktop that I've just demoed to you. So this took the Power Pivot, Power Query and Power View functionality into a standalone tool that crucially removed the dependence on Excel and made it possible to provide wider availability and enable rapid updates. And I think I mentioned already that it's free. Microsoft also launched the new Power BI service, a cloud-based service that was no longer tied into SharePoint Online, thus making it accessible for far more people. Since July 2015, there have been a lot of updates, including releases of Power BI Desktop on at least a monthly basis. And the number of developments released each month is pretty astonishing. I won't go through everything that's been added, but you should get a flavour of some of the pace of change. In August, a few updates were released, including the ability to import from work in Excel. In September, there were loads of updates in all areas: report authoring, data modelling, data connectivity, and data transformations. In October, a couple of important updates. Custom visualizations, a really powerful addition that has allowed people to develop their own visualizations for use in Power BI. There's an online gallery from which you can download and use visualizations that other people have developed. And also direct query connectivity. So rather than loading data into Power BI, as I showed you, this allowed direct query capability to connect live to SQL Server without the need to move data around. Notice that this was initially a preview feature, and this is a nice aspect of the releases. You get all the latest fully available features, but also the option to enable or disable features that are in preview. In November, more data connectivity, SSAS multidimensional, SAP HANA, and importantly R to enable more statistical analysis. In December, some more basics, the ability to change text size and number of decimal places, sort of things that were massive frustrations for people in the earlier versions of the tool, but also new visualizations and the ability to embed R visualizations. And the releases keep coming. February brought the introduction of live connectivity to Oracle and Teradata databases, as well as the ability to actually see data behind a visual and export to CSV, which was again a frustrating omission from earlier days of the tool. SAP BW Connector was added in March, and in April the ability to add trend lines on visuals, which was another vital addition that brings it in line with basic requirements you might expect from a visualization tool. In May, a new category, analytics. That disappeared in June, but in June we also had things like searchable slices that I've already shown in my demo. Row-level security was also introduced, which is very important for enterprise use. By July, we had the addition of Amazon Redshift as a source. And in August, the all-new analytics pane, which signaled a shift to build more analytics capability into Power BI. September introduced forecasting functionality into the new analytics area, as well as providing the ability to define mobile-friendly report layouts. And in October, we saw loads of additions into the analytics area. So that brings us up to date with a release that's just a few weeks old now. This introduced things like the drop-down slicer that I've already shown, as well as clustering functionality that we'll have a look at in a few minutes, and also added Azure Analysis Services as a new data source. Hopefully that's given some flavour of the pace of change. In fact, I understand that the development team of Power BI has grown to something like 1,000 developers, which gives some idea of the commitment Microsoft are making to further improve the product. Okay, so another quick demo of Power BI Desktop, and I'll highlight some of the new features. This time, I'm going to start with a trade profitability dashboard we've already developed for a fictional consumer goods company. In this dashboard, we're looking at different channels across the top and the details of retailer profit. That includes visualizations such as gauges and waterfall charts. So I can filter using slices on the top for large supermarkets, or select a specific retailer, Williams, and that's updated all the charts. One recent addition of functionality is the ability to exclude outliers in charts if we think they're distorting the analysis. So this has only been possible recently and has been, again, something that's been widely welcomed by colleagues of mine who have struggled to do some of the analysis they wanted to do without being able to exclude outliers. I'll move to another page in this dashboard and look at a correlation chart. So here we're looking at how different measures correlate to each other from the underlying data. The larger the circle, the larger the correlation. Blue is a positive correlation and red is negative. This is actually statistical correlation created by some R code. If I click on the visualization, you'll see in the top right here that the visualization selected is actually an R script visual, and at the bottom here is the R script, simple R script that we've used to create this correlation. But that's actually then surfaced a visualization that's created in R rather than using a Power BI visualization. But it still interacts with the Power BI data. So you can see on the right-hand side here that all the inputs into this R script are coming from our Power BI data sets. And if I select one of the channels at the top, the visualization is updated based on the selected channel. I'll move now to the sales forecast tab. And we have a graph here that's showing my actual sales data over the last few years. On the right here, we can see the analytics pane that was added a few months ago. And within this, there's the ability to add forecasting. So I can add a simple forecast, I can change some of the features like the confidence interval, and get a forecast in Power BI automatically without the need of any statistical coding. If I think there are points that are distorting my forecast, again, I can exclude them if I want to. I can interact with this with the slice in the same way as normal in Power BI to get different forecasts. And one thing I wanted to look at was actually choosing a different time period to select the months that are used for this to drive the forecast. So I'm going to add in a filter using months. I'm going to choose my filter, choose months, and this is another new type of filter that Microsoft have introduced recently, which is like a timeline slicer. So I can simply slide along here, and that will remove some of the months from a graph and update the forecast accordingly. And finally, I'm going to switch to a different example based on bank data. So this chart is showing the correlation between the number of advisors in a branch and the average of new business, with each branch plotted on the chart. Again, I can filter to a different bank to look at how those branches are plotted. Now, I mentioned earlier that Power BI allows you to choose whether to use preview features. So if I go to my options within Power BI, there's a set of preview features in here. So there's a few in here at the moment that I can choose to enable or disable. So I've chosen for this demo to have clustering enabled. So what I want to do here is actually provide different segmentation of the branches based on different characteristics, because I'm able to take different actions depending on how they're performing. In the past, we'd have had to write some R code or some other statistical analysis to create these clusters, but I'm going to allow Power BI to do that for me. This new preview feature allows me to define clusters. I can define the number of clusters or let Power BI decide for me. You can see it's defined 5 clusters based on the data that it can analyse. And each of these clusters may need different actions depending on what the characteristics of them are. One final point, in the analytics pane, you see I've already defined a trend line here for this data. I can now actually separate this out so that I can look at how the trend is for all the different clusters that have been defined. Okay, so that was just a quick demo of some of the latest features of Power BI Desktop. And there's new features coming all the time, so certainly recommend that you keep an eye on the blog on the Power BI website, which gives updates for releases as they come out. I'm now going to have a look at the overall architecture of Power BI and some of the enterprise features. As I've already mentioned, there are 2 key components to Power BI: the desktop tool that I've demoed to you, and the service that allows wider sharing and collaboration, as well as enabling access through mobile applications. In terms of the desktop tool, I wanted to quickly reiterate the key functionality. In Power BI Desktop, you can connect to a variety of data sources, both on-premise and in the cloud, and some of these support a live connection, whereas with many, you need to load data into Power BI. There is the ability within Power BI to transform data as it's being loaded, which puts some of the traditional ETL functionality into the hands of the Power user. The modelling capability gives Power users the ability to combine data from different sources into a data model and add calculations. And finally, a key aspect that I've been showing is the ability to build reports, visualizations, and carry out analytics. This is a list of data sources that you can currently connect to from Power BI. From all of these, you can load data into your Power BI model, but for some of them, you can also connect live to your data source so that you don't have to move data out of your source systems. So you can see that it's possible to connect to sources such as SQL, Oracle, Teradata, and SAP HANA with a live connection. The Power BI service is the cloud-based offering that allows wider sharing and collaboration. With Power BI Desktop, you can save workbooks locally and share the files manually with other people, but the Power BI service gives a more robust method for sharing. In particular, you can publish to the service from Power BI Desktop and share content to defined user groups or via content packs. There's additional functionality around creating dashboards from individual report items, as well as the same authoring capability as is in Power BI Desktop. Further functionality that is only available in the Power BI Cloud service is Q&A and quick insights, and we'll look at some of those in a moment. The Power BI service also enables connectivity via mobile apps and also allows you to embed Power BI visualizations in other applications, for example in SharePoint or Salesforce. So a quick overview now of the architecture of the Power BI service. The Power BI service, represented on the left of this diagram, is a Microsoft Azure cloud service. If you're taking data from a cloud-based data source such as Azure SQL database or Salesforce, then the connectivity between the Power BI service and the cloud application is relatively straightforward, as you can utilize the security of your cloud-based data source. Connectivity to on-premise data sources, though, is obviously more complex. There are 3 ways of managing this, really. The option shown at the bottom of the page is to manually refresh data. We saw in the first demo that once I've loaded data in Power BI, I publish the dataset and reports to the Power BI service. So for any data source that you use in this way, it's possible to manually refresh and reload data. There is a limit though on the size of dataset that can be uploaded, which is currently at 1 gig. The other options for connectivity to on-premise data involve utilization of the Power BI Gateway, which is installed on-premise and facilitates secure transfer of data between your organization and the cloud. For many sources, you can configure the data source in Power BI to refresh on a set schedule from data in your organization. This goes via the gateway to handle the connectivity and security as data is transferred, but again, the same limit on model size of 1 gig applies. The final way to architect your data connectivity is shown at the top of this diagram. For certain data sources, it's possible to have live connectivity to your on-premise data such that Power BI reports connect in real time to retrieve data from your data source. This also requires the Power BI Gateway and removes any limit on data size for your application. The table on the right here shows which data sources currently allow this live connectivity, rather than having to be handled via manual or scheduled refresh. You can currently connect live to analysis services, SQL Server, SAP HANA, Oracle, and Teradata from the Power BI service. Finally, Azure Active Directory may be required for enterprise customers, as it can be configured to replicate your on-premise Active Directory to handle authentication and pass through credentials to your on-premise data sources. I'm going to now briefly cover some of the enterprise capabilities that Power BI has developed that are resulting in wider adoption in large organizations. A key aspect for enterprise deployment is the ability to control access to content and data, and different levels of access control have been built into Power BI to allow different levels of access to content, along with the row-level security functionality. Live connections to data sources would typically have data-level security controlled at the data source where possible. Another key functionality within the Power BI service is the ability to create content packs of dashboards, reports, and datasets for specific groups that are great for giving users starting points for their analysis. It's also possible to look at content packs from other service providers. For example, there are some standard reports and dashboards that I can download and use for free to give insights on my Salesforce data. In terms of licensing, I've already mentioned the desktop application is free. There's also a free version of the Power BI service, which can be used but has some limits to functionality. The Pro version currently costs around $10 per user per month, and is required for many features an enterprise organisation would typically need, such as sharing via groups and organisational content packs, direct query against data sources, frequent data refreshes, and data connections that require the Power BI Gateway. We're expecting some further changes to the licensing options, which we'll cover in the last section of today's webcast. Finally, a very important component of Power BI is mobile access. There are apps available for Apple, Android, and Windows devices that allow connectivity to content hosted in the Power BI service. It's also possible to enable offline caching of data, up to 250 meg limit. So I'll show you now some of the Power BI service features I talked about. So I've already shown you a little bit of this in the first demo, but let's look in more detail. Looking at datasets, you'll see I have two here. The demo one that I published earlier, and the dataset for the consumer goods demo. Within these, there are various options, including options to schedule a refresh or to refresh manually. One feature I mentioned earlier is the quick insights. So if I click on that, Power BI will automatically try to find insights in your data. So you'll see that Power BI has analysed the data that's been loaded in that dataset and created a load of reports based on patterns it's found in the data. There's also the ability to analyse the data in Excel. So this provides a data connection that allows you to connect from Excel on your laptop or PC to your cloud model and analyse the data in standard pivot tables. So this is representing the data model on the cloud. I can, for example, look at my gross margin, look at that broken down by channel. So this complements the visualization capability of Power BI with a more data-driven analysis that is a strength of Excel. Another key functionality is the ability to create custom dashboards from existing reports. So I can pin individual charts from different reports onto a dashboard. Here, if I click the pin icon, create a new dashboard, let's call it My Dashboard, and I can pin that to the dashboard. Let's include sales forecast as well. Stick that on the same dashboard. And let's also take a chart from the visualization I created earlier and pin that to the same dashboard. So if I go to my dashboard now, it shows key reports that you can interact with, or you can click on to go to the underlying report. Within the dashboards, I have the ability to format the layouts, but also, that's the layout for the web access, but also to set up the layout for phone access, or mobile access in general. So again, I can rearrange how I want this to look if people are accessing it through a mobile device, and then switch back to the web access if I want to, again, set the layout for web access. Finally, you'll notice that there's the ability in this dashboard to ask a question about the data. And this is the Q&A feature I talked about earlier, which enables English language query of data. So for example, I can type show retailer profit by time, and eventually it shows me a chart of the data. So that's quite a powerful functionality that allows, and is getting enriched all the time in terms of allowing people to query the data without needing to understand any sort of coding or how the data model fits together. Okay, so I'm now going to take a look at what the future may hold for Power BI. I've already mentioned that Microsoft have a lot of developers working on this, and the pace is so fast that generally there isn't a long-term roadmap available from Microsoft. Indeed, a large part of the development is driven by demand. There's a site called ideas.powerbi.com that allows users of Power BI to suggest improvements and vote and comment on other ideas. For example, here's a suggestion to implement a running total calculation, which would have been useful for me in my first demo. Not that popular though, it's only got 44 votes so far. But I'll go through some example ideas that are more popular and that Microsoft have started developing and we would expect to be released soon. Things like being able to embed via a web pass in SharePoint Online, which got over 5,600 votes. Additional time hierarchy intelligence. Additional slicer functionality, and we saw some of that in the initial demo, with the drop-down slicers now being available. The ability to send reports and dashboards by mail, and being able to export PDFs from Power BI Desktop directly. You can see from the status at the bottom of these that all of these changes are in progress and are being developed by Microsoft. Here are some examples that Microsoft have planned to do, but not yet started on, so might be expected in later releases. Global filters and dashboards. The ability to integrate SQL Server reporting services reports into Power BI, alongside the Power BI content. Being able to pass filters to the URL to control your online dashboard via URL parameters. Folders to organize content. And the ability to copy and paste data to other applications. Finally, some examples of suggested changes that are under review but haven't yet been approved by Microsoft. So if you like any of these, then go and vote or comment on them. The decomposition tree. Those of you who are familiar with Clarity or Performance Point services will probably be aware of this popular visualization. The ability to print from Power BI Desktop rather than what you have to do at the moment, which is to take screenshots and print them out. Power BI for the Mac is a popular suggestion among some of my colleagues. And then things like additional drill and slicing functionality. But there's one suggestion that I wanted to give a bit more focus to, and it's one of the most requested improvements with over 6,000 votes, and that is the ability to host Power BI service functionality on-premise rather than having to use the cloud service. And you'll see from this that Microsoft have been working on this and very recently released a technical preview of this functionality, which utilises SQL 2016 reporting services to host Power BI reports. And I'll show you this now. For this preview, you can deploy Power BI Desktop reports to SQL Server 2016 reporting services and consume the reports directly on the reporting services portal. Previously, you could save Power BI reports on the portal, but you would have to view the reports through the Power BI Desktop. With this new update, users can view and interact with self-service reports published to reporting services. This preview is currently limited to connecting to a live analysis services data source. Also, custom visualizations are not currently supported. So this is the Power BI desktop preview. I have an executive dashboard report open, and I want to publish it to the Reporting Services web portal. With this preview version of Power BI, there is a new option to save the report to my Reporting Services server, as you can see here. After I enter the server address, I can provide a name for the report and choose where it goes. I'm going to put it in my executive dashboard folder and leave it called Pennsylvania. Press OK, and that goes away and saves that to Reporting Services. Okay, so that's done. Now I'll switch over to the SQL Server 2016 Reporting Services web portal. For those of you familiar with previous versions of Reporting Services, you'll notice it has a completely new look and feel. There are KPIs to give me a quick glance at our key metrics, mobile reports that I can view from this page or from my mobile phone or tablet, as well as traditional Reporting Services reports and Power BI desktop reports. So I'll go into the Executive Dashboard folder. I can see my Pennsylvania report has been added, so I can open that report, and that's now opening it within the web portal on my Reporting Services server. With the report open, I can analyse our sales performance by interacting with the data in the same way as I can in Power BI. Another feature available in this preview is the ability to add commentary to your reports. Users can add, modify, or delete their comments and reply to other comments. This feature allows analysts to easily post annotations related to the insights they're gaining from the reports and collaborate with others to take the appropriate action. Finally, some other things we hope Microsoft will focus on in the coming months based on feedback we've taken to them from other customers. We expect to continue to focus on enterprise features to grow the number of enterprise deployments, things like better auditing and governance, logging and usage metrics. We also understand that Microsoft are considering their approach to licensing for large organisations that don't want to license on a user-by-user basis, which has been a concern for some of our customers with thousands of users. There will be continued improvements to discovery and visualisation capabilities, as we've been seeing over the last 18 months. And lastly, more apps that people can use as starting points for their analysis. So in summary, Power BI has been on a rapid development journey and continues to evolve. If in the past you thought it wasn't as good as other tools or wasn't ready for enterprise use, then a lot has happened that may change that position, although there are still gaps in some functionality and features. With the rate of change and the focus from Microsoft, there's every chance that those gaps may be filled, and it will become an option that may be worth considering for your organisation if you're not already using it. How can we help? Well, we've worked with a number of customers recently on assessing Power BI and its roadmap, and how it may or may not fit with their strategy. If you would like an informal discussion of your situation and whether Power BI could be something of interest for your organisation, then please do reach out to me. My email address is on screen now, john.ward@thorogood.com, and a colleague or I will be happy to have a chat. And finally, a few words on who we are and why we are able to help organisations such as yourselves. We focus only on business intelligence and analytics, have vast experience of implementing business intelligence and analytics solutions for global organisations. We always look to combine an understanding of business objectives with appropriate technical focus to ensure solutions meet business needs rather than solely being an IT project. We are independent of vendor, so although I've been focusing on Power BI today, we also partner with all the other key vendors in the market, which means we're able to give an honest, independent view of the strengths and weaknesses of the many technology options. Finally, we have specific focus on insurance, banking, consumer goods, pharmaceutical and healthcare sectors. That really enables us to bring industry understanding to our solutions. We do, though, also work with organisations outside of these sectors. So that concludes today's webcast, and just leaves me to thank you again for all attending, and do feel free to get in touch if you have any additional questions or would like any further discussion. Thank you.